much, Professor Venkatachalapati. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I congratulate Professor Vijayabhaskar and Kaliharasan sir on their definitional book, which is going to be discussed for a very long time indeed. I have the disadvantage of not having had the chance to read the book, but I have been fortunate enough to read a joint article written by both the authors, which was carried in the Hindu not long ago, and so have a sense of the trajectory of the book, and of course have got a great sense of the book's intent and the book's impact from the discussions held today. Every single panelist has spoken with conviction and with authority. I have absolutely no credentials to speak either on the economics or the political side of economics or the political economy of the state whatsoever. Absolutely none. For I am just an administrator who has stumbled from position to position. Unlike my senior colleague, Dr. Narayan, who has made a deep study of the subject and has spoken a couple of minutes ago from his vital understanding of the dynamics of administration intersecting with public policy and with economic insight. I will therefore take no more than a few minutes. Professor Venkatachalapati, could you tell me how many minutes do I have?
So you can take your time, sir, 10, 15 minutes easily.
No, I shall be briefer than that.
Okay, sir.
I will just speak impressionistically, which is the only way in which I can speak. And I'll start by saying that the word, the phrase that captures you in the book is Dravidian, the Dravidian model. And I'm so glad that Jean Drèze said what he did about it, Dravidian. And I want to enlarge that phrase by making a literary allusion and to say that outside Tamil Nadu, from beyond the southern peninsula, the imagination of Dravidam comes from the song which is our national anthem, in which Tagore mentions Dravida, and that is the only reference that he makes to a region unlike a province, as opposed to a province. Vindhya is also mentioned, and Vindhya was a province at one time. But Vindhya and Dravida are the only places which he refers to as a large region in the political imagination and the literary and cultural imagination of that song. So, going by that inaugural and, shall we say, atrial description, I think we should concede the point which Dr. Narayan mentioned almost in passing, almost incidentally, that the Dravidian presence in the political and administrative imagination of our country precedes the assumption of office by the Dravidian parties in our state. One could, of course, go to the era when this region was under the administrative leadership of leaders of the Justice Party. But other than that, there is a whole unfolding of imaginative, audacious steps taken by the Madras province and by Tamil Nadu, which precede the assumption of office by the Dravidian parties. And the presence of a Dravidian voice in the national chambers of India began before 67, from the time when they were outstanding leaders of the DMK in Parliament, starting with 62. There is today need for a book of the kind that we have just seen launched. For this reason, that the concept of the Dravidian voice, of the Dravidian presence, of the Dravidian ethos, that concept needs to be better known in the rest of India. Mention has been made of corruption. It is a tragedy beyond words that when you speak of our state, you think of the instances of celebrated corruption. It is a tragedy because, true as it is, and deeply worrisome and disturbing as it is, and researched and commented on by Mr. Ram in his pioneering work on corruption as it is not the whole story. There is a Dravidian presence that needs to be unfolded. And I think this book has played that role, or is going to play that role very significantly. And I just elucidate what I mean. The Dravidian voice in national chambers, when Annadurai was an MP, when Professor M. Ratnaswamy, an economist, was an MP, when Ira Serian, a public intellectual, was an MP, was a phenomenally important voice. And it is known, this is not the stuff of political legend, but it is documented that Nehru was quite entranced by Annadurai. Annadurai was almost a discovery in Parliament. So where has that discovery gone? Where has that voice gone? Is it silent today? All the accomplishments which this book describes are true, they are documented. But there is something more than those accomplishments, which was very real, starting with Kamaraj becoming the kingmaker. We remember when Shastri died, and the country was benumbed by what had happened. So soon after Nehru's death, Shastri dies. There was Kamaraj. There was a kind of a Madras, Tamil Nadu, the Dravidian personality was a stabilizing factor in the whole of India. And Kamaraj and Annadurai, coming from different backgrounds in Tamil Nadu, really stood for a kind of strong, earthy common sense, also with a national vision. Now that voice has fallen silent. And we should want it back for a couple of reasons, and I will elucidate them and round off. The federal concept is the stuff and subject of academic discourse. But what does it really mean? It means the larger presence of the regions of India in the crystallization of a national perspective, which is what our national anthem is about, in which Dravida figures. Federalism today is voiceless, and that voice has to come back. It was very strong, and it started, shall I say, just by way of recalling what had happened with Muthulakshmi Reddy, who led to the abolition of Devadasi. It led to the abolition of untouchability, started by Dakshayani Velayudham, who was also in the Constituent Assembly. So these were national pioneering steps emanating from the south, from what could be called Dravida. Today, I think, Tamil Nadu has a chance, as Mr. Ram pointed out, to revive the federal spirit in India, which should also be, as it was in the time of Kamaraj, though not from a Dravidian party, but from the soil of the Dravida which Tagore has spoken of, integrity, transparency, selflessness. Mr. Ram said, in one simple word, a clean alternative. So we need that kind of voice to tell us where our lurch to the right, to obscurantism, to superstition, to ritual has to be stopped. The challenge of the right, which is anything but federal in spirit, that lurch can only be challenged by an integritous and courageous Dravida voice. I will just refer to the fact that Periyar's extraordinary leadership of what can be called the Dravidian view has evaporated, even from the Dravidian parties. And this is a great tragedy. I do not hear Periyar in the discourse of today's politics in Tamil Nadu. And there are many things in which Periyar was audacious, in which he was ahead of his time. And I am conscious of the fact that I'm speaking in the presence of a person who is going to write the definitive biography of Periyar, Professor Venkatacharya. But I would just like to say this, that Periyar's emphasis on gender equality, which Professor Dre's mentioned, on the rights of Dalits, which Mr. Ram mentioned, and basically on justice, which is beyond all barriers of caste and class, has to come back. And one area on which Periyar has not spoken because the subject was not urgent then, and I'm sure if it was, he would have spoken about it, is the subject of the physical environment. Nobody has today had chance to speak on that. And I do not know if the book refers to the natural resources of our state. I don't know what Chief Minister MGR had in mind when he asked the question which Dr. Narayan mentioned, how many Palmyra trees are there? But the physical environment is something which needs to be flagged. Tamil Nadu's record in asking questions under the RTI Act is not bad, but it is not good enough. The RTI Act's behavior in our state is to be appreciated, but it cannot be celebrated. For the RTI campaign in our south, in our state, in Tamil Nadu, has been not as strong as it has been, say, in Karnataka or in Kerala. If it had been, then questions relating to the physical environment, to the natural environment, to the status of our soil, to the threat to our rivers, to our aquifers, would have been raised. I would like the Dravidian voice to recapture the spirit of the Dravidian movement from the subsiding of the velocity of that movement in the processes of election campaigns, election victories, and government. I feel the extruding of the spirit of a movement from Dravidian politics is to be lamented, because the loss of the velocity of that movement has meant also the loss of the values of that movement, which led to so much that was transformational, not just in India's Dravidian South, but in the country as a whole. And I would end by saying that the most magical word in the book, the Dravidian model, the Dravidian word, has to recapture its magic and recapture its soul by being what Periyar would have liked it to be, in the sense of being transformational, of being valued and cherished by the country as a whole, as Kamaraj and Annadure were by the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. I thank you.